edition of the Ad Podcast. We have a fun guest for you guys today. Chris Kneeland is the CMO of Spikeball. Well, what is Spikeball? I'm sure you guys know it. Those that you have seen it, you'll be walking up and down the beach and you see some people playing some version of volleyball and kind of high contact hacky sack, or for a lack of a better word. But yeah, it's always grabs my attention. I haven't played, so I'm excited to get into a little bit of the origin story and how Spikeball has become such a cult-like following within kind of the alternative sports space. Chris, before he became CMO of Spikeball, was the founder of Cult Collective, where he helped brands such as Harley-Davidson, Zappos, and Best Buy achieve cult status within their categories. Chris, thanks so much for joining us, spending a little bit of time with the audience today.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So, yeah, let's just kick it off a little bit with your origin story. So, 20 years at your company, Cult Collective, but now you're the CMO of Spikeball. Where'd you grow up? What'd you study? And how'd you get into the brand marketing and advertising space?
I consider myself, my growing up was half my childhood was in St. Louis, Missouri. Mm-hmm. Half my childhood was in Dallas, Texas. I did my formal education, my undergraduate at Brigham Young University, and my graduate degree from Northwestern University in Chicago. I feel like ever since I really thought about what I want to do for a living, which would have probably been maybe my senior year of high school, I always thought about marketing. Probably because my dad was in marketing.
No way.
He marketed for independent pharmacies. So they were always he was helping local mas and pas compete against the Walgreens and CVS's of the world that were sort of taking over the, small towns across the country. But I think two things. I feel like I wasn't paying that much attention, but I felt like my dad had a good sense of humor. There was a degree of creativity, whether that was creative problem solving or the development of creative communications, things that seemed clever. And, I liked, I usually think I might be a copywriter just because I liked the idea of how do you create something that persuades somebody to do something. But I think even more importantly, I think my dad liked his job. I grew up in an era of 80s sitcom television where, the dad going off to work and he dreaded it, and he had to go to Cheers for a drink afterwards, or you join a bowling alley, or Roseanne, the guy comes home and he hates his life and hates his job. And I was like, what a miserable existence. Like I want to be going to work every day. I want to enjoy what I'm doing. And my dad liked his job. So that had an influence on me, and zero regrets. So the more I've learned about, and marketing in particular, I mean, not to be confused with advertising. I think there's a meaningful difference. And I really love the art and science of marketing, and have really kind of stayed in that very narrow space for the duration of my career.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, I know you had your agency Cult Collective, and I don't know if you still do that in addition to Spikeball, but, you were there for over 20 years. What did you do before launching your agency?
So when I got out of grad school, it was 2000. Fascinating time to be entering the workforce, both because of the turn of the century and also just the rise of .com and digital. I mean, this was in the earliest of days, back when we would go to Yahoo to do our search engine queries, and people were still dialing up on AOL, right? So that kind of history. But there was just a real sense of optimism and excitement about brand and consumer journeys and CRM and databases. And then it only got more exciting with mobile and social technologies and big data and all loyalty programs, all these sorts of things, I think really sort of got perfected in the sort of the arc of my career over the past 24 years. But, I always thought my dream job was being the CMO of a Fortune 500 company. I grew up in a kind of a corporate environment. I don't think I had any friends you know, a lot of times when you're a kid, you don't pay attention to what your friends' parents do. But the idea of entrepreneurism, the idea of an agency or an ad agency, none of that was in my wheelhouse. So when I got out of school, I just went to work for the biggest brands I could get my hands on, John Deere, and then I went to go corporate side at the Home Depot. But personally, just my personality, I'm not a very good cog in a big machine. I prefer sort of the meritocracy of an ad world or of a consultant's practice, where you're kind of valued more for your individual contribution than your participation in some larger ecosystem. So I kind of left corporate world and went to go agency side and worked for a very large agency. And I moved back to Dallas at that point, and then moved to Canada, of all places, to take over an agency that we later rebranded Cult. And had a very specific niche where most agencies, I think it'd be fair to say, are very acquisition focused. Certainly most agencies do a lot of advertising, and advertising is all about new customer acquisition. I always preferred more about, I like to say I don't like to create ads, I like to create advocates. I always enjoy more the idea of lifetime value and getting people to not just buy, but to buy into something. And, you know, I just, part of it was just the privilege of some of the brands I had the chance to work with early on were very influential in getting me to realize there are some businesses that are just much more meaningful and significant in people's lives than most businesses. And why is that? Why are these exceptions so exceptional? And so that really started that journey to eventually creating Cult, which was very much about anybody can get a customer, but a really special brand is required to get a cult-like following. And so I went into the dark arts of cults and trying to understand how the psychology and the behaviors and what do people do? Like, is it just luck? Or is it really intentional? Is it malicious or manipulative? Or is it brilliant and masterful about how some brands pull it off? So that's really been, you know, certainly the last dozen years has been very focused on that. And when I ran into the CEO of Spikeball and got to know his story and his journey, I was like, you have all of the raw ingredients of what these iconic cult brands have. How can we preserve that and codify that and make sure that it's not by accident that you have done these things, but there's a lot of discipline and intentionality around what they're trying to create. So he was kind enough to bring me on. I mean, Cult is still I still own Cult, but I spend some time doing fractional work. I have a couple of clients that I devote, you know, my week to help them as sort of well, we call it a fractional CMO now. That term's kind of become vogue in just the past couple of years, but it's been a blast. I'm loving it.
Yeah, you know, that's a trend that I've seen. You know, a lot of agency leaders kind of, you know, dual hyphen it as a fractional CMO, either for the client's business that they've been on, maybe in the interim, or actually becoming kind of a full-time, long-term fractional, well, not full-time, but the long-term fractional CMO, especially with independent agencies. It seems to be a trend. And I think it's probably because, you know, you get so close to your client that, you know, at some point they want you, you know, behind the curtain, so to speak, versus just as the outside as a service provider. Before we jump into Spikeball, I want to spend a little bit of time focused on this idea of a cult brand, because I think you've spent a career investigating the attributes, like you mentioned, that go into creating cult followings. And, you know, I think our marketers would be well served learning from some of your hypotheses of the, you know, there's probably no guarantees. It's like cult reminds me of like going viral. It's like something that people strive for, but it's almost impossible to manufacture. But there are key environments that you can, you know, increase your probability of virality or getting earned media. There's an environment versus like a pathway. And my guess is that cult status is probably something that's similar. It's hard to manufacture, but there are some things that you can do to maybe put yourself in the direction of that terminology. You know, you mentioned Harley Davidson. That's such a standout to me. You know, I'm a male from a family of Harley Davidson riders. I've never owned a Harley myself, but I have Harley Davidson boots. I buy Harley Davidson t-shirts in every vacation that I go on from like whatever place that I'm in. And there's something that's like this association with my family, but like also this aspirational component of, you know, just not just the style and the iconicness of it, because, you know, it kind of becomes like mainstream and then goes back to its core like throughout the years. And as like riding motorcycles become more popular or less popular, but nobody, I think, can deny the idea that Harley Davidson has achieved cult status within its consumer base. What are some of the key attributes of a cult brand, of a brand that has achieved cult following?
Short answer to that question is there's actually 8 core principles that we've sort of decoded, and I'm happy to delve into those. But before I do, let me just take one quick tangent. I mean, I love Harley Davidson. Literally, when we built Cult, we had like Harley on our vision board. We didn't call it a vision board back in the day, but we were like, businesses like that need agencies like us. And through some serendipitous, universal, whatever karma, the Harley called us, and they ended up becoming our first client. So wow. It was a real dream to be able to look under the hood and see, is the inside as awesome as it seems from the outside? And I'm pleased to report that it is. It is a truly special brand. I don't love using Harley as an example because so many people dismiss them as an exception. And it's almost, I don't usually use Nike, Apple, Starbucks, Harley. Like there are some of these iconic, notable brands that nobody would dispute are awesome, but also nobody says, I can do that. They seem so unattainable. They seem like they're just so different. And Harley does have 2 superpowers that not every business has. One is their model lends itself to lifetime value. You buy a $20,000 or $30,000 machine, and they will make more money on you coming in to get it chromed out or to swap out the seat or to upgrade the LED lights, to buy the merchandise and the apparel. So like not every business can make as much money on a customer after the initial sale as they can prior to the initial sale. There's not as many business, you know, if you're going to buy a pair of jeans from Levi's is going to make money from you the next time you need a pair of jeans. You're not going to come in to get it bedazzled or, you know, whatever decorated by Levi's. That's why automotive companies spend so much time on service and parts. Like they need to try to monetize that cost of acquisition. And Harley, just by the nature of its category, benefits from, get somebody to buy something and you can make twice as much money from them over the next 10 years than the initial purchase. The second thing that Harley has going for it is a wildly social activity. Riding a motorcycle is more fun when your friend has a motorcycle. So the word of mouth is baked into the experience because nobody wants to go riding by themselves. And so I'm actually quite fascinated by this point because when you look at some of the largest advertisers in the world, some of them are pharmaceutical and telecommunication. And it's because you might know I have an iPhone. You don't have a clue if I have Verizon, T-Mobile, or AT&T. It's hidden, right? I'm not taking you into my bathroom to show you my medicine cabinet, what pills I'm on. So when we don't talk about those products, the brands are forced to talk about it for us. And that's why they're always shouting at us and putting their names on stadiums because they have to be always so top of mind. Versus something like Harley. And one of the things that really attracted me to Spikeball, you don't play Spikeball by yourself. You need
it's a team sport.
So every set I get into the market is a billboard for you mentioned the beach, every beach and park. And one of the things we try to do is get people to not play in their backyard, like take it out to a common place, because that's helping the people see it. And so Harley is remarkable for many, many reasons, but they do have two of those fundamental advantages that, an HVAC company or an apparel brand doesn't have.
Yeah, totally. And another brand that I notice is in your resume or the agencies with Cult is Zappos, famously, famous for their customer service. Zappos at face value, it's another e-com company that was coming up during the e-com, kind of gold rush, focused originally on shoes. But what made them famous is they turned a component of their business, which is customer service, which is generally considered an expense or something that you outsource to a call center, or you figure out how to automate through chatbots. But in the early days of Zappos, it was all done over email and phone calls. And they turned something that would normally be considered a burden or a cost center, and they turned it into a word of mouth superpower, which is famously Tony Hsieh created the culture where, if somebody called or interacted with Zappos in any way, the customer service agent was to take it to the nth degree of being helpful, to be so helpful and so, over the top in their approach that people couldn't help themselves from sharing it through word of mouth, like you said. So there are industries that kind of seem a little bit maybe boring at face value, that if you can figure out a component of your business and take that from, mediocre to extraordinary, you can create that same word of mouth engine.
So one of these 8 principles that I mentioned is called be remarkable. What people mistake that for, they think what I'm saying is be exceptional or be extraordinary. And that's not the synonym for remarkable. The synonym for remarkable goes to the root of remark. It's be buzzworthy or notable. Essentially, what do you want people to talk about? And you need to be intentional about that. And the more commoditized your business is, in the case of online shoe selling, there's just no reason why Zappos should be successful. They don't make their shoes. They're selling the same shoe you can buy anywhere else. And you can't try it on until it arrives. They don't go on sale. They're not cheaper than the shoe you could get at your mall or Foot Locker. And so Tony was just brilliant to say, well, I have to give them a reason to choose me. So our remarkable is going to be our service experience. And one of my favorite stats was, most people that are familiar with call centers understand that the game is turn. How many calls per minute can an agent take? And Tony did the exact opposite. He would reward you for how long can you keep a customer on the phone. And there was a leaderboard. Wow. And when I was there, it was up to 19 hours. It was obnoxious. But he also really understood his target audience. His target audience were people who had high fashion sense but lived in tertiary cities. Think of something like Boise, Idaho, where their nearest shopping mall might be Spokane or Salt Lake City in terms of a meaningful big mall. So they wanted all the fashion stuff, but they didn't have easy access to it. And so that audience also tended to be a little bit more folksy, conversational, friendly, looking for somebody to talk to, kind of a thing. And so, it wasn't the stereotypical high-powered New York, investment banker that doesn't have time for you kind of a thing. This was people that know their neighbors and sit out on the front porch and offer you a cup of tea and all that sort of stuff. So it's just his ability to target a certain audience and give them something that they desired that nobody else was doing made them a $3 billion success story. I mean, I think Costco is a similar sort of way. There's just no reason why Costco should work. It breaks every rule of retail, and yet it has a cult-like following of people that are fanatical about it.
Yeah, and also the idea with like Costco, it's not only the fact that you can get a 5-gallon tub of mayonnaise, but it's this kind of exclusivity factor where you have to pay a membership and you're part of a club. I'm sure you've studied Costco way more than me, but my wife came back from Costco today and my eyes are bugging out at the amount of stuff that she's shoving into our refrigerator and our cabinet and another refrigerator in the garage. But it's like, for families, with lots of kids, it's almost, unavoidable, really.
I mean, it's just a great example. Again, some of my favorite brands like Zappos, like Costco, like Spikeball, and even like Harley, they just don't advertise that much. I mean, it's not quite that simple, but it's close. It's a symptom of, way back in the day, I worked with Geek Squad. And I always attribute this quote to Geek Squad's founder, although somebody's told me later that he stole it from Jeff Bezos. But either way, pretty good company. Either Jeff Bezos or Robert Stevens, who started Geek Squad. He said that advertising is a tax that brands pay for being unremarkable. And it's like pick your poison. Do you want to spend your money becoming remarkable? Or do you want to spend your money trying to tell people that you're remarkable? And I just prefer the former. I think, why don't you just become great as opposed to be mediocre and spend all your energy trying to, the brands that have the best advertising, I'm the most suspicious of. Like, what are they hiding?
That is a hot take for sure. I love this idea also of like a superpower. You talked about Costco, we talked about Zappos. You mentioned Geek Squad, which is part of Best Buy, and Best Buy for a long time was known as this place where, if you were you're going in to buy things that are not always, even if you're technologically savvy, you go into Best Buy, and I still go into Best Buy because I buy podcasting equipment. I bought this microphone, I bought this camera, I got stuff on the shelf. And I go in there and I still look for, salespeople, not only to show me where to find the product, but to make recommendations. So like, hey, I'm going to be shooting in this environment. I want a microphone that is minimal amount of setup. And I also want it to be able to isolate noise in these situations. And, surprisingly, to their credit, as retailers have had to pull back on hiring, because of economic forces, I feel like they've lowered the bar on what it takes to be a great sales associate. And a lot of times you go into these retail environments and the people who are on the sales room floor just don't have the product knowledge or the enthusiasm that you once saw from great retailers that Best Buy has continued to somehow, keep intact. And then, imagine Geek Squad is essentially the outsourced version of that, right? Like, we'll send people to your house. So when your computer breaks down and you don't know what's going wrong, somebody with expertise can come in and help you alleviate that pain point that we've all had when our technology, poops the bed, so to speak.
Listen, I have a real soft spot. The agency that I moved to Texas for poached me from Home Depot because they had landed Best Buy as a client, and Best Buy said, I love your agency. I don't know that retail, big box retail. Again, this is 2005 when that concept was still emerging. And so I spent 5 years of my life on a plane flying to Minneapolis to work with Best Buy. And we helped put Circuit City out of business, which was their biggest competitor, and really leaned into the blue shirt, which is the shorthand for their approach to customer centricity and competing against, at the time, Circuit City and Walmart and a bunch of regional consumer electronic chains. Now it's all Amazon, but the same strategy is equally effective at being the place they called it eradicating or eliminating techno stress, the anxiety when you have 6 remote controls on your coffee table and you're not sure which one does the Blu-ray or the surround sound or the TV or the thing. And like that technology is supposed to make our lives better. And even like your podcasting setup, like it's wonderful when it's working, but if it stops working and you don't know how and why, like your life becomes hell. I mean, it's like, just imagine how people feel when they now, we didn't even have this in our pocket 20 years ago. And now we have like, we freak out if we don't know where it is at all times, like a lost kind of a thing. So I think Best Buy, there's only 2 brands I've ever experienced that I think does it better than Best Buy. Home Depot is up there. I think Home Depot also does a really great job of product knowledge. But are you familiar with Scheels? It's a niche sporting goods retailer, sort of like Bass Pro Shop.
Yeah, they have them in like Montana and Wyoming, Nebraska. And it's like it's like half sporting goods, half outdoor retailer, but then usually they have a gun store in the basement, right?
It might be my favorite retailer of all.
Wow.
They are a remarkable retail story. But also Lululemon is very, very good at their product knowledge, the employee training. You're in a 90-day course before you're even allowed to talk to customers. I know retail clients that you'll get lucky if you get 1 day of training before they throw you to the wolves and expect you to add value. And Lululemon is just methodical in terms of its curriculum and its onboarding. And I'm just super impressed with both of those brands.
Yeah, and you mentioned Lulu, like the idea of being remarkable and things are better when done in groups. What I've always appreciated about Lulu is that they try and kind of turn their retail storefronts into micro community centers. So they may host yoga classes or have workshops or have, run clubs. They have like activities that have nothing to do. Well, I mean, some would say you would be better served to, do these activities when you have Lululemon products on, and maybe that was the idea. But again, like you said, like that word of mouth idea is like if I show up to a Lulu store at 3:00 with 10 other customers and I go on a run, and then we talk about our experience and it builds brand love and brand loyalty, and we do that in community and we take a selfie at the end of it and post it to our Instagram, that's a remarkable component of their business.
I mean, Lulu, when I moved to Canada, my biggest client was a clothing brand kind of similar to maybe Sears in the States. Not particularly aspirational or luxury, but kind of mid-priced. And their bread and butter was the blue-collar worker. But they knew that the blue-collar worker was often shopping with his wife, and so they created a women's section in their store so that if he came in to get some steel-toed boots or some heavy-duty outerwear, the wife could take a peek over. And they created a line of fitness apparel that I think was of comparable quality to Lululemon. And Lulu started in Vancouver, so it was more pervasive in Canada for a year or two before it came into America. So we were aware of this rising interest in this athleisure category. I think my client's product was comparable in quality. It was half the price. So the Lulu pant was $99. Ours was $49. I had millions of dollars of ad budget. Lulu was spending $0 on advertising, and I could discount, and they would never go on sale. And so I had all this arsenal of marketing might to go, squash this up and coming brand called Lululemon out of Vancouver. And we didn't make a dent. Like the irrational affinity for women, for that little logo on there to say, yeah, but they're not Lulus. They weren't even called stretch pants or little, I mean, they were just Lulus. They were all brainwashed by what Lulu was able to accomplish. It's actually one of the first times I went toe to toe against a cult brand and just realized this, I'm bringing a knife to a gunfight. And it's not because I don't have more resources. It's, I have the wrong playbook. I'm trying to do traditional marketing and advertising against a person that has mastered guerrilla warfare. and we had to bail. Like it was an absolute failure.
That's wild. Yeah, I've studied Lulu quite a bit, and I know that they have this concept of the muse. It's the they don't necessarily market to a segment; they market to a person, and they would give that muse a name. I forget what her name was, but they knew the attributes that she had. They knew what her schedule is. They knew how many kids she had. They knew what car she drove, and all of their marketing spoke to her. Because she was the one that would go tell 20 friends about the product. So if you can, it's kind of like, if you can go viral within your core audience or have deep penetration within your core audience, it will expand logically to the second and third circles and outward.
But and that muse is how Harley became Harley, is how Gatorade became Gatorade, how Nike became Nike. My favorite Lulu fun stat, and I don't remember the exact one, but this is going to be directionally accurate. Something like 2/3 of women who are fanatical about Lululemon not only don't do yoga, they don't even go to the gym on a regular basis. And yet, when you ask them about their fitness, they feel sexier, healthier, and more physically fit just because they wear the brand. It is such a psychological shift where, like, the muse would absolutely be a yogi, but like if it was only for that group, it would stay super small. The fact that they got all these other women to say, well, I'm not like that, but I'd like to be.
It's aspirational.
It's so aspirational. It's so sexy. And the pants are weirdly flattering. I always used to joke that you have like some sort of lever or pulley system in there that just kind of makes everything look just perfectly tight and functional. It's a weird feature or benefit of the product that made people say, well, if I can look this good, maybe I don't have to do all the hard work of actually going to the gym to look this good.
Bit of a cheat code, right?
It's an absolute cheat code.
That's awesome. All right. Well, I think it's time we start to talk about Spikeball. So tell me how the opportunity came into your orbit. And, you mentioned you met the CEO of Spikeball and you noticed that there were some attributes that would lend themselves to a cult brand. What was it that initially excited you about it? And what were those attributes that you saw within Spikeball that you think could lend itself to cult status?
I've tried to reverse engineer our first date, if you will. To the best of my recollection, the CEO and founder of Spikeball, a guy named Chris Reuter, commented on something that I had posted on LinkedIn. And I'm a prolific writer about these cult brand principles and these cult brand attributes. He knew that Spikeball was behaving like a cult brand, and just by his own instinct and intuition had been applying most of these principles, not realizing that those were codified principles. He just was a smart, intuitive marketer, as is the case with many, maybe even most cult brands. It was a privately held company where you get to do the right things for the right reasons. You're not subjected to Wall Street's quarterly demands and venture capital's unrealistic expectations for growth. This was a guy that was just instinctively trying to create community and add value, and sometimes out of necessity as well. Like he started this in his, basically out of his basement. And so it wasn't like he had massive ad budgets. He didn't have a big injection of capital that would let him grow it. So he just had to do it naturally and organically, which is also how cults grow. You don't see billboards for a cult. Cults are, you tell two people and they tell two people. So I think he was just sort of curious. Hey, I'm wondering how much of what I'm doing aligns with your understanding of cult brand. So I came in and just did an audit. That's one of our core products, is we kind of take the 8 principles and we assess how well are you delivering on each of those 8 attributes. And then he realized that some of them he was knocking out of the park. Some of them he hadn't even thought about and started. So he asked me to stick around. So I basically for 6 months worked with his head of marketing to apply some of these principles. And then she had moved to the UK and took a different job. And so there was a vacancy. And I said, at this stage in your company, I don't know that you need an expensive full-time senior marketing leader. I'd rather you use that money to actually put stuff into market and make it working capital versus overhead. So why don't you let me do it for a couple of days? And then 2 days became 3 days, and we've been together almost 2 years now. And I think one of the differences between a fractional versus just like a consultant is, in addition to advising on go-to-market strategies, the team and the agencies report to me. I have a seat on the C-suite, so I'm involved in strategic planning. I have budgetary control, so I'm actually deploying the capital into the different tactics. So, it's for all practical purposes, I'm the CMO. I just don't do it on Thursdays and Fridays. I just do it.
I love it. I love it. Well, it seems like you mentioned it's kind of an in vogue title or trend right now, but I think it kind of also points, I think, to the gigification of the white collar workforce, right? I was in agency life for 13 years. I've been doing fractional chief revenue and chief marketing roles more on the B2B side, less on the consumer side, although I've done a few consumer things here and there. And I think it was, largely out of necessity. The last agency I left, I just didn't see the full-time, chief revenue officer jobs, flowing as much as they used to. So the opportunity to work on a few different clients at a time, it's not very different than agency work. It's, you got to manage your time correctly and allocate to each client based on, blocking and tackling off time and things like that. So I think it seems to be making the more and more senior marketers that I meet that at least have the title, they've either eliminated the title completely at their organization, absorbed it into other titles like growth officer, a lot on the growth side, or the chief customer officer, or they're moving to fractional. So it seems to be a trend. Could you tell me a little bit more about the origins of Spikeball? So, I've seen it. It looks very exciting. People play it at like a very high level here in San Diego, and like it's very athletic. But what was kind of the initial idea, and how did it come to fruition? And tell me a little bit about the mechanics and the rules of play, and why do people, get so engrossed in the game?
I didn't realize, Dylan, that you live in San Diego.
Yeah, Carlsbad.
So after this podcast, you need to go down to, I forget, a Promenade Beach or something. Like tonight is the end of season bash. It's one of the largest spikeball parties in America. There's a very spikeball community that gets together every Tuesday night, but they stop in October. So tonight is we actually have a contest winner that will flow out there today, and one of my marketing team guys is out there. It's a good time. In fact, I went last year, and we set a Guinness Book of World Record for the number of concurrent spikeball games happening at one time. San Diego's a fantastic market for us.
Makes sense. Well, we have the most mild beach and the beach weather and the most amount of days to be able to hang out at the beach. So it makes sense. I may have to check that out.
Long story short, so Chris Reuter, so Spikeball was invented in the late 80s, I believe.
Wow. Okay. So it's been around for a while.
I want to say since 89 or 90. I forget the gentleman's name who invented it. He mismarketed it, in my opinion. He took it much more as a child's game and tried to sell it through like Toys R Us. And it's not a great child's game. It requires a certain amount of hand-eye coordination. You're hitting it with your hand. So obviously the bigger your hand is, the easier it becomes to play. And after just a few years, I want to say less than 3 years, it discontinued. However, Chris's neighbor or friend bought one, had one growing up, and years later, decade or more later, They go to Hawaii on a vacation, and his friend brings it. And only the mildest of recollections that we used to try this as a kid, but now they're in their 20s or whatever and much more athletic. And they spend the entire Hawaii vacation, on the beach playing it with multiple people saying, what is that thing? And where did it come from? And how do you play? And it looks cool. And he was working, I think, for Live Nation or Microsoft or something like that at the time. Had a corporate job, but that just, as a good entrepreneur is, it kind of haunts him in his sleep. Like, that was among the most fun. And a big part of him too was it was a great bonding moment for him and his brother, who weren't as close, and him and his friends. Like, it wasn't just a fun game, it was a social activity. Which is very core to the brand. The whole tagline of finding your circle is it is very much about the people you play with is as important as the game that you play. So he looks it up and says where and that it had been dead for a long time, and I think the patent had expired and all this, and he ends up just assuming control and says, well, let me manufacture this again, and kind of stands it back up and sells it on nights and weekends while doing his full-time job. I think when he got to $1 million is when he told his wife, I'm going to quit my job now and do this full-time. They were doing it out of their condo in Chicago. I think it was just really organic, it got better and better and more pervasive. Started there in Chicago along the shores of Lake Michigan, and a big boost for them was he went on Shark Tank, I think in 2015 or 2016. And it was just this gigantic commercial. It was the right product at the right time. Shark Tank was at its peak. That made like Walmart and Target and Dick's Sporting Goods call him and say, can we put you on our shelf? So, I mean, think about that alone. Think about how many entrepreneurs are bending over backwards to get a meeting with a retail buyer. And Chris is like fielding inbound calls saying that looks like something that we'd like to have on our shelf. Absolutely. Every year doubles up and to the right, just goes. It goes international. He spent a lot. It was really interesting because it's kind of like Kleenex, where Kleenex is both the category and the name brand. Like Spikeball was
like a bird.
Like the game is actually called Roundnet. But the brand is Spikeball, and everybody says, let's just go play Spikeball. We don't hate that.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's good for us in terms of that association. But, people started to become fanatical about it. People started to form competitive clubs. Governing organizations got stood up, the International Roundnet Federation, the United States Association of Roundnetters, the Pro League, like things that we could certainly encourage, but we didn't have to do it. Like these communities started to build where they wanted to make it an Olympic sport, or they wanted to do my college versus your college, or my country versus your country. And it's just amazing. It's like that level of enthusiasm is not something that we can fabricate. That's something that just something is inherent. As I mentioned about Harley Davidson, motorcycles are just more fun to ride with your neighbor has one. Spikeball is more fun to play if your best friend plays. And so just the mechanics of the game, I think the price point helps. The portability helps. Price point meaning if your family was going to go to rent a beach house, spend $60 and buy a Spikeball set. Like it's not a expensive investment. Leave it there. Leave it at the house. Leave it at the Airbnb. Leave it at the hotel. You don't worry about it. Portability. Take it with you before your football game. Take it with you while you're at your kid's soccer game and your other kids need something to do, right? So there's just a lot of things that are built into it that made it easy to share. And we're still kind of riding that wave today, figuring out which bets, we've built on accessories. We do things so it can float in a pool. We do things so you can play at night. It glows in the dark. You do things so you can play where littler kids can play with a bigger net and a bigger ball. So now it's a big part of PE curriculum, so it's a PE teachers get into it. And if we can, like a good drug dealer, if we can get you addicted early, play Spikeball, for the next 20 years kind of a thing. So I love it.
Yeah, or if you can get it into schools, yeah, you get them early, but it's mandated by the PE teacher, right?
Yeah.
I love that.
It's been amazing. I love it.
Yeah, no, that's cool. You mentioned something that I think is an interesting dynamic around sports and sports marketing, and it's kind of that moment in which you achieve like professional or semi-professional, status, with the idea that one of the fastest growing categories in the world right now is the live streaming effect of the fact that live sports and live programming is the last bastion of scheduled programming. People show up to an eventized moment for a live stream because they want to see their favorite sport or their favorite activity in real time. This idea of like professional leagues, you've seen a lot of this in like the pickleball fanaticism and craze, but I think you guys have even a level up on the pickleballers, because the pickleballers require courts and you don't have as many passerbys like in a park or on a beach, et cetera. Like you talked about that built-in billboard effect, or that built-in remarkable nature of passing by and people being like, what the heck is that? How have you guys been able to harness this emerging of a professional grade of player, and is live streaming and kind of making that a televised moment part of the strategy?
I want to answer that, but let me make one comment on pickleball. I live in Salt Lake City. I think this is interestingly one of the top markets for Spikeball, but it's also one of the fastest growing markets for pickleball. Pickleball has two advantages that we don't have. One, it's got a 60-year head start. Everybody seems to think that pickleball emerged out of COVID, but pickleball had been invented in the Northeast a long time ago, in the late 60s. And it's kind of like they say, it's a 50-year overnight success story. Like I like to do a lot of tracking of, how long was pickleball around before it got on ESPN versus how long have we been around? How long before it got to its first $1 million? Like where our trajectory, you've seen the stats where it's like how many years before Facebook got its first 1 million users, and then Instagram did it twice as fast, and TikTok did it twice as fast as that. Like Spikeball's trajectory is so much faster than pickleball, but in comparison, we're just a young company. We're 17 years old. Pickleball is 65 years old. And so I'm excited to see where we're at 20 years from now, because we're going to hopefully just continue this upward trajectory. The second thing that they have, like our target audience is 15 to 25. Pickleball's target audience is 45 to 65. The difference between a 15 to 25-year-old and a 45 to 65-year-old is discretionary income, right?
And free time.
my set, like my most expensive set, is $160. You can't go onto a pickleball court with any sort of lack of shame if you don't have more than a $200 racket in your bag. Right? It's the comparison, and my $160 set is shared by 4 people, so it's basically $40 a person. Versus, in my league, it's 4 of us each playing with a $200 paddle. That's a $800 game going on right there. So
and then you're not talking apparel.
Yeah, like the whole ecosystem and to your point, they have to have dedicated facilities. You have to pay for court rentals versus I just need a patch of grass or a patch of sand. So I'm not looking to trade places. I think there's a lot more built-in advantages with Spikeball, but we certainly have an eye on pickleball. I'm fascinated with cornhole. I'm fascinated with all sorts of little niche sports. And I've studied intimately the MMA. I've gotten to meet Dana White and understand what he did.
Wow.
Because UFC is probably the only other comparative sport where the brand is the sport. So Spikeball is to Roundnet what UFC is to MMA, but UFC has just become the dominant player there, and that's what we obviously want to do in our market. But then to answer your Spikeball has a fundamental challenge, and it's not that different than what maybe tennis has dealt with. Maybe what NASCAR or Formula One deals with, which is the better you get, the less enjoyable it is to watch. Because if you play a bunch of elite tennis players, it's serve and ace. And what people want to see are volleys, right? If you love NASCAR, like, what are you going to do if you go to a NASCAR event? Sit one place and watch a car drive past you every 10 minutes at 200 miles an hour. Like, what you need is the drone footage, you need the television camera angles, you need the commentators. I love studying the NBA and the NHL and the NFL. It wasn't until Jordan or a Magic and Larry Bird, and then the 1-2 punch of Jordan after that. You look at like 1970s basketball graphics and commentators, and it sucks. Or, even the NFL, it was, give me the instant replay, give me the inside the booth acknowledgement of what the coaches are talking about, right? There's a lot of things that go into making it very spectator friendly. And I think Spikeball is a blast to play, but I don't know how I would fill an arena for people to watch that. I don't know how to celebritize my star players. Name the top pickleball player in the world. Maybe name the top Spikeball player in the world. I don't know, right? Because there's not the sponsorship, there's not the endorsement, there's not the money where somebody can now say, I'm going to quit my job and just play Spikeball all day as a career. So those are examples of, we have to crawl, then walk, then run. We do have ESPN deals. We have been playing with different YouTube streaming, but it's multiple cameras. You need to have really overhead footage, and streaming is just live streaming. It doesn't then get you back to the instant replays. So a lot of times, like when we do our worlds, watching it live isn't as great as maybe watching an edited hour of just like, think about golf. You don't just follow one golfer through all 18 shots. They're constantly jumping over. Now let's go to so-and-so on the 14th hole. Now let's go back to so-and-so on the third. Or think about the NFL red zone. They're just showing you what's happening from teams that are in the 20-yard line and beyond, because people don't want to sit and watch a whole game. They just want the highlights. So there's a lot of that sort of viewership sort of consideration that will attract the advertisers, that will attract, gate ticket sales and stuff like that, that we're just in the early stages of figuring out.
Yeah, that's interesting. So to date, there are exciting moments, but like the continuous watching of a match is not as exciting as like pulling out the best parts of it. I think golf is a great example. You got this whole fleet of people that are out on different parts of the courses. So you can kind of like pop over to the most exciting moments, which is generally when people are swinging the club, not when they're walking from spot to spot or sizing up a shot. It's, and then it's especially when the ones that land, on the green and have some kind of dramatic moment of getting close or setting people up for, the next possible shot. So it sounds like with Spikeball, it's more about how do you capture those moments across a wider field of players that are the exciting moments, but a lot of the tactical, just, winning a point or a match or something like that can, be not as exciting because these guys are really good at keeping the ball in play.
Exactly right. So, I think cool. I'm fully confident. What I love is that we Spikeball don't have to figure it all out. People that are crazy talented, young kids that have grown up as digital natives that are already, putting stuff on TikTok. Like we have over 400 million social views right now, and 90% of that's user generated content.
Wow.
It's people have just, again, it's one of the built-in advantages that when your target audience is 15 to 25, it didn't really happen if they didn't record it, and they love to show off what they've done. And so we just have a lot of advantages that, other clients don't enjoy.
That leads me to an interesting question. You talk about UGC, you talk about the prolific nature of your audience being younger and more digital savvy, maybe more accustomed to vertical video. Have you guys are also a lower price point, which is nice. Have you guys entered TikTok Shop yet? Have you seen that be a channel for you guys that are?
Yeah, it's funny you say that. I was just chatting with somebody else 2 hours ago about this. We got hot and heavy into TikTok Shop, thinking that was going to be our big strategic push for the year, be an early adopter of social selling. Largely underwhelmed by it to date. Couple of hypotheses. You look at some of the really thriving categories on TikTok Shop right now. It's very young women centric, very cosmetic centric, apparel centric. And it's some of the margins are different. Like, to really do well in TikTok Shop, you do a lot of seeding, product sampling, which, if I'm giving you a $20 lipstick that costs me $2 to make, I can ship a lot of those. If I have to send you a $100 set that costs me $50, I can't send out thousands of those. I can send out dozens of those. So the tsunami of interest isn't really the same. I do believe that social selling is legit, but I'm not prepared to say it's mainstream yet. I still think it's the domain of early adopters. And you'll hear these amazing case studies. The case studies is what lured us in as well, because I want to do what they did. But then you look at something like Dude Wipes. Dude Wipes is a very successful online seller, but that's a replenishing category. They need once you buy a Spikeball set, you're not buying another one for a year or more, right? So Dude Wipes needs to keep your pantry loaded every single month, and so it's just a different model. And so we're not giving up on it, but some of our enthusiasm has worn off as we tried a lot of things and didn't see a lot of success early on.
Did you have a comparable from a case study from TikTok Shop that you were like, oh, these guys did it, so we could probably be similar? Like, what was the case study that got you excited?
I mean, we looked at people that do silicone rings, people that have done wallets, people that have done Dude Wipes. There's a company called Pop Darts, where I believe a former Spikeball employee is now. It's an outdoor game. I guess you could play inside too, but it's a comparable sort of price point and game. So yeah, I mean, I think certainly the CEO's bias is looking for best in class examples, but it's okay if they're in other categories. He's good friends with the people that do radio flyer, the tricycle.
Interesting. Yeah.
Like that. He's friends with people that do holiday decor items. And so, sometimes we have to decide, are these business models so different none of that case study applies, or are there still principles or truisms that work for them that could work for us? And the other thing about Spikeball is like the holiday decor one's really interesting, because I tell my friends that we're 1 degree better than like a Christmas tree lot farm. Like imagine if that's your business. Like your business is November 20th to December 20th, right? 100, or maybe if you sold haunted houses, or if you sold fireworks for the 4th of July. Like Spikeball's business is largely May to July. Like we are when the sun is out, guns are out, Spikeball's being played. So, we need to figure out, how do we smooth out that revenue? In fact, we're getting ready to come out with an indoor tabletop game, because it doesn't have to be warm outside to play this version. It's called Spike Pong. We're actually launching it on Kickstarter next week. And so we do a lot of things like that to try to, even some of our international strategy is trying to be relevant. Where can we go when most of America is snowy or cold? Where is it still hot and sunny?
Yeah, that's interesting. It seems you guys have like the World Surf Leagues issue. You have to chase the sun all year and go to these climates where, I mean, the good news is it's always summer someplace. So, but that doesn't always mean that it's in the right markets and the places that you have brand awareness and stability, et cetera. Well, Chris, I appreciate you joining me later on your side in Colorado. Been a fascinating conversation to learn more about Cult brands and how you're taking those 8 core principles and bringing them to the business of marketing Spikeball. As I mentioned, have been probably like you, I'm sure you hear this from many people, I've seen Spikeball. I have a high degree of awareness of it, but I've never played. And I imagine that's probably the hardest thing for you guys, is to take that awareness and get people into trial. So I think it's somewhat kismet that your event is tonight. So I'm going to go, rattle some heads in the living room and see if my family is up for a last minute.
You'll have a great time. It's a very inclusive, welcoming community, and there's worse places to be on a fall night than the beach of San Diego, for sure.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, we've got plenty of warm weather to go until, we call it local summer. We get until clear into November these days. So, Chris, if folks want to learn more about Spikeball, or if other people in the industry are hearing this interview and have ideas for you about connecting for a partnership or something like that, where would you like to point people towards?
Yeah, Spikeball, our storefront, for lack of a better word, is at spikeball.com. You can see all about some of our exciting new products and learn more about the communities, whether it's college groups or competitive players or just casual players. And then, for myself and my advisory firm, that would be at cultideas.com. And I've been told I say cult funny. It's not like the Indianapolis Colts. It's like, no, joining a cult. Trust your instincts on that. It is as it sounds. It's cultideas.com.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, Chris, thanks so much for coming on the show. For those of you who are watching at home, if this is the first time you're seeing the Ad Podcast, don't forget to give us a follow or a subscribe. If you're listening, if you give us a review on whatever podcast platform you're listening, that's how we find a larger audience organically. And if there is somebody out there in your professional world who you think would get a kick out of learning more about Spikeball, maybe playing, maybe need some tips and tricks and some insights on how to help move their brand towards cult status, or just would enjoy my conversation with Chris about the idea of fractional marketing and how brands can take more advantage of bringing in senior marketing leaders without having to have them 5 days a week, get to rent them on a little bit more of a pro rata basis, please share this episode. And for that, I will go ahead and say goodnight, Chris. Appreciate you coming on.
You're very welcome, Dalen. Really enjoyed meeting